In 1998, one album defied the popular polished hip-hop of the day, helped bring underground into the mainstream, and catapulted the careers of two MCs. Today, I'm breaking down the classic album Mos Def and Talib Kweli are Blackstar. We'll talk about the music scene they came out of, the formation of the album and group, and dive into the music and each MC's style to see just how incredible this album is. Keep in mind, I'm not going to be able to talk about everything, otherwise this video would be 2 hours long. So when this video is over, go listen to the album, because as a piece of art, it says far more about itself than I ever could. In the late 90s, hip-hop was more popular than ever, but as with any music scene, there are about 1,000 different variations and micro-scenes within the larger genre. It would be a crime to single out a specific artist, label, city, or coast as inhabiting the entire genre. And in this case, New York, the original birthplace of hip-hop, was now home to not only the shiny suit bad boy artists, but also a thriving underground scene. Out of this time emerged a duo who combined elements from the underground scene, rapping about life as young black men in New York, with incredible skill that was not only light years beyond their peers, but made mainstream rappers look amateur by comparison. In short, the 1998 Blackstar album came out of the underground scene, showed that a different kind of hip-hop could be commercially viable, showcasing incredible skill and intelligence, and putting Mos Def and Talib Kweli on the map. Astronomy was the last song recorded for the album, but is a great introduction to the album as a whole as it poses the now famous question,
what is the Black Star?
Of course, the song has many answers, but one of those was the shipping line launched by Marcus Garvey, whose Pan-African philosophy inspired the Rastafarian movement and the name of this album. This song was produced by the Beatminers, specifically Mr. Walt, with scratches by DJ Evil D, and features Weldon Irvine on keys. Kweli had met Weldon Irvine at Nakiru, where he would perform spoken word. More on Nakiru in a moment, it's a very important place in this story. Weldon Irvine began hanging around the recording sessions, and as Kweli tells it, they initially took this beat to be nice to the label, but once Weldon added his keys, the whole song came to life, and they knew they would need to start the album with this track. For Mos Def, who now goes by Yasiin Bey, it was a big deal to be acknowledged by such a legendary musician. In addition to his own releases, Weldon Irvine served as Nina Simone's band leader for many years. His playing can be heard throughout this track and adds another layer of musicality. Astronomy features a constant back and forth between Yasiin and Kweli, weaving in and around each other, which is reminiscent of groups like Run DMC, but in an even more sophisticated way.
You know the light,
go from the dark,
the other way is ass backwards.
absurd.
Make you wanna crow like a blackbird.
That's right.
You living from your first day to your last night. Sometimes you show your ass like
Lit on your clothes
when you froze in the black light.
Dead that.
Before you get your head wrapped,
Like Badu.
we see through your voodoo just like Eve's Bayou. You dealing with that black magic.
Try to civilize you.
Not walk on by you
Like Sybil.
lies do get you blacklisted.
It'll
Be unlucky for you like a black cat.
a panther.
Revolution is the answer.
That's what we need.
Greed plague my people like a cancer.
True indeed. Black people.
Of course, there were many other great artists before Blackstar that weren't the shiny suit type and had talked about real stuff with music to match. Talib Kweli was inspired by groups like Public Enemy, Big Daddy Kane, and Boogie Down Productions, more on that in a minute too, but set against the backdrop of the shiny suit era particularly, Blackstar stands out. Talib Kweli is the son of two college professors, so listening to artists like these opened his eyes to what was possible in hip-hop. He recalled, all of a sudden the things I learned at home were being talked about on records. It all came together. I'm a writer, that's what I do. I just happen to be a musician, so I put my writing into music. In the early 90s, Talib Kweli met Mos Def, Yasiin Bey, and they were sort of centered around two cultural hubs. One being Washington Square Park, where the freestyle cypher scene was thriving, and the other being Nakiru Books, a historic African-American bookstore in Brooklyn. Kweli worked there, and he and Yasiin would go on to purchase the bookstore together in 2000, converting it into a non-profit which now exists exclusively online. Nakiru Books is where they would gather to discuss ideas, share poetry and spoken word, and Washington Square Park is where they would sharpen their skills as MCs. Bey recalled, I first met Kweli in the Village. There were a lot of creative young people hanging around Washington Square back in the early 90s. I heard Kweli's demo and I liked his style a lot. It was unusual. I liked the way he put his ideas together. And speaking about Bey, Kweli recalled, we were casual acquaintances and I really respected him as an artist. I was working at Nakiru with the mother of my children and became friends with the mother of Yasiin's first two children. Our families would get together from that connection, and that's really where Blackstar was born. The first single released from this album was the song Definition. The idea for the song came out of a trend in their circles at the time, going back to old school hip hop. With that in mind, most suggested they should do their own version of Remix for P is Free by Boogie Down Productions. This song is from the 1987 album Criminal Minded, and the hook and beat are the same, though not exactly. DJ Hi-Tech produced this, remaking the beat and making it sound more modern. Hi-Tech is a very important part of this album as he was with the duo throughout and produced half of the album.
the top. Stop the violence in hip hop. Why oh? When I'm in Brooklyn, yes, we're rolling hip hop. Hey. When I'm in Manhattan, we're rolling hip hop. Hey. When I'm in Queens, we're rolling hip hop. Hey. When it's Staten Island, we're rolling hip hop.
Yo, it's like
1, 2, 3. Mos Def and Talib Kweli. We came to rock it on to the tip top. Best alliance in hip hop. Why oh?
This song was conceived as a tribute to Boogie Down Productions and KRS-One, but since it's remade, it feels fresh and more modern than just rapping over the same instrumental. Yasiin and Kweli are a perfect pairing on this album because they're both trying to express the same ideas, but they're still individuals, each with their own style. As Kweli describes it, he'd like to write to a beat for a couple of weeks and feel super prepared, whereas Yasiin would immediately start singing and rapping as soon as he heard the music. You can hear their differences play out in their different flows on this song. Listen how Mos on this verse lays everything squarely on the beat and sits right there with it. It's non-stop lyrics coming at you.
From the first to the last of it, delivery is passionate. The whole and not the half of it. Forecasting aftermath of it. Projectile let them blast away. Accurate assassin shit. Me and Kweli close like Bethlehem and Nazareth. After this
Talib Kweli, on the other hand, floats around a little more, often loosening his grip on the beat. Sometimes he packs in a lot of syllables in a short space. It's not necessarily in perfect time with the beat, but it feels great, especially when he lands back with the beat a bar or two later.
you think you the shit, somebody in the wings will force you to quit. It could be your crew, a clique, or some random kid you smoke Buddha with. Consider me the entity within the industry without a history of spitting the epitome of stupidity. Living my life, expressing my liberty, you gotta be done properly. My name is in the middle of equality.
Blackstar is decidedly not a group. It's two MCs who teamed up together for this album. And yes, their eventual follow-up album from 2022, No Fear of Time. Both MCs had previously been part of other groups or been featured on other songs. Bey had been in UTD and worked with De La Soul and even released a single. Kweli had been featured on the album Doom by the group Mood, but neither MC had released their own debut album prior to this. Yasiin and Kweli were both involved with the record label Rawkus, releasing singles on their own. Most had had a bad experience with big labels in the past with UTD and didn't want another full record deal, and Kweli was determined to continue building his group with High Tech, Reflection Eternal. So a deal was made with Rawkus. Mos and Kweli would team up for one album together, then a full-length Reflection Eternal album would happen after that. Blackstar was never intended to be a formal group, and both MCs wanted to continue to pursue their careers independently from each other. The first album became 1998's Mos Def and Talib Kweli Are Blackstar, and the second album of the deal became 2000's Train of Thought by Reflection Eternal, composed of Kweli and High Tech. Speaking of High Tech, after he remade the Boogie Down Productions beat for Definition, he kept going and made his own version of the beat. Mos and Kweli liked it so much they couldn't decide which one they liked better, so originally they kept both. They turned in the first version of Definition to Rawkus as a 6-minute song that featured both beats, but of course, this was eventually cut into 2 songs for the album that flowed directly into each other. Both Yasiin Bey and Talib Kweli give incredible performances on this album, pushing rapping as an art form to a new level. For Yasiin, let's look at his verse on Redefinition. Midway through his verse, he starts rhyming 3-syllable words and just doesn't stop.
so I'm way past the minimum. Interim millennium, my raps the whole gap to your back like Palestinians. Ancient Abyssinia, surely horny Gideon, official b-boy gentleman, long term, never the interim. Born inside the winter wind, day after December. These simpletons they mention in the synonym for feminine. Sweeter than some cinnamon, the Danish range by intermen. Rush up on adrenaline and get their asses sent to them. Gentlemen.
For Talib, here's part of his verse on Respiration. This song was produced by High Tech, features Common on a verse, as well as Deshaun Jenkins, who played guitar in Common's live band. After going back and forth with Common for a while, they finally got together in Chicago, but no one was feeling the original beat. So High Tech made a new one and the song continued on. The only problem was Kweli had written his verse to the other beat, so he had to spend some time reworking it. They finished recording the song in New York, and the result is,
Look in the skies for God, what you see besides the smog is broken dreams flying away in the wings of the obscene. Thoughts that people put in the air, places where you could get murdered over a glare. But everything is fair, it's a paradox we call reality. So keeping it real will make you a casualty of abnormal normality. Killers born naturally like Mickey and Mallory. Not knowing the ways will get you capped like an NBA salary.
On Definition, we saw them rework Boogie Down Productions, but on K.O.S. Determination, we see them lean on influences from another hip-hop scene. For one, this song features Vinia Mojica on vocals. She was known for her work with the Native Tongues Collective, having collaborated with the Jungle Brothers, De La Soul, and A Tribe Called Quest. The hook of this song is from the Minnie Riperton song, Baby This Love I Have.
Things I say and do may not come clear through. My words may not convey just what I'm feeling.
Yes, come on.
And if the music behind those vocals sounds familiar,
Back in
in the days on the boulevard I landed.
That's because it was previously sampled by a Tribe Called Quest.
The abstract.
And me the 5-footer. Knowledge yourself is like life after death. With that, you never worry about your last.
This album feels so different from mainstream hip-hop in 1998, and fans and critics praised it as saving hip-hop, but for Talib, he never saw it that way. He recalled, "When we had shows, people would be yelling, Jay-Z, Puff Daddy." It was interesting because I didn't share those same sentiments. Either way, it was impossible to escape the fact that we had come to symbolize a new hope for hip-hop, a rebirth. This album hit number 13 on the Billboard hip hop charts, with Definition peaking at number 3, which is incredible, not because Blackstar's not an incredible album, but the opposite. Usually something this high level doesn't have mainstream appeal. Reflecting on the album, Yasiin Bey is proud of what they made, saying, "We were saying to the world at large, we're a lot more dynamic than you might assume. It was another perspective, showing that there are more narratives besides the macho narrative, the self-congratulatory narrative, and whatever others. Those weren't our narratives." Talib Kweli and Mos Def would go on to release solo albums to wide acclaim, and while they've each had solo albums that outsold Blackstar, this album is remembered as some of their best work. Blackstar is a classic album that not only put Mos Def and Talib Kweli on the map, but also put them both in proximity to a new scene, the Soulquarians. But for the story on that scene, you gotta watch this video.